It's wonderful when we can share with each other what genuinely works for ourselves. It's it's that being genuine, which is all important. We don't have to know all the answers, but if we can be honest with what we do know and what we don't know, and we can be honest with what we've discovered and the limitations of that, and we can be humble and say, this is what works for me. Isn't that wonderful? Then we won't deceive each other, and we will we won't have these sort of power games that can sometimes occur in these spiritual type teachings, where maybe a teacher is elevated as being a more superior being. But we can just be real with each other as equals in mutual friendship and affection for each other. And I think the who am I, or to whom is this occurring, or who is having this feeling, these kinds of questions, they question our identity, which is at the core of this teaching. The core of this teaching is, well, you can say that there are two cores of this teaching, which are related and ultimately the same. But the first one comes down to maybe the deepest core. It comes down to identity. Who are we? And because we take ourselves to be the body mind, or whatever form of limitation we impose on ourselves, and because that is an untruth, a fiction, that the questions like who am I, or to whom does this occur, or who is feeling this feeling, or who is having this thought, that they undercut our belief in what we just presume ourselves to be out of habit, unconsciously, out of habit. We take ourselves to be body mind. We believe we're a body mind without even questioning it most of the day. These kinds of practices help us break that vicious cycle of suffering and misidentity, and suffering and misidentity. I said there were like two cores of the teaching, didn't I? One is the identity. Who are we? We think we're the body mind, therefore we suffer. The other aspect of another core aspect of the teaching is that we think we need something to fulfill us. So we seek. And the two are related, these two core aspects of teaching. But this other way, you can phrase it as a separate core aspect of the teaching. You can phrase it like that. And because we believe that something external to us somehow will complete us, maybe it'll be very subtly external to us, like a form of knowledge. If we get some kind of special knowledge or understanding, then we'll be fulfilled. If we just understood this thing, or if we had a special experience, if we just had some sort of special experience, some sort of mystical experience or something, then we'll be fulfilled. Or a combination of, or something. There's this belief that we need something to be fulfilled. This is the belief that we're not complete. This is the belief that we are incomplete. This is the belief that we are unwhole. And from that, seeking occurs, and we seek things. We seek experiences. And actually, knowledge and understanding is just a particular kind of experience, if you think about it. It's a phenomenal appearance within our consciousness. So we're seeking various things. This seeking, we can call it desire. It's not just like, it's not a petty, mundane desire. It's desire for fulfillment. It's a deep-rooted desire. Because we don't know who we are, or rather because we take ourselves to be limited and incomplete. There comes this desire. So we've got these two core problems. One is that we take ourselves to be limited, and two, we take ourselves to be incomplete, unfulfilled, needing something external to fulfill us. And you'll find that spiritual teachings usually tackle one or other of these core ideas. So the teachings that tackle the I'm the body-mind fiction, these are the insights of the wisdom teachings. They will say something along the lines of, you are not the body-mind, you are pure consciousness. They will say, there is no you. You think there's an entity which is creating your thoughts and feelings and actions. That's a fiction. So it's attacking your illusory sense of identity as a limited entity. These are the wisdom and insight teachings. They will say, question, who am I? And look. This is attacking the ignorance of identity, misidentity. And then you've got another kind of teaching which attacks the seeking for fulfillment in objects. And these will say things like, be still, relax, quieten the mind, quieten your thoughts. Because they're tackling the seeking. Attacking the seeking which occurs because we feel that we need something to complete us. When we don't. What we are does not need anything external to it. It's only the mind that thinks it does. So you've got these two aspects. These teachings are often what I call them the purification type teachings. Or the quietening teachings, the teachings of silence, the meditation type teachings. Quieten the mind, stop the seeking energy. Whereas the other teachings which attack the wrong identity, the misidentity, are the wisdom teachings. You've got these wisdom teachings and you've got these silence teachings, quietening down the system type teachings. But these two types of teachings. And if you take any one of those teachings and you take it right to the end, to its logical progression, it will lead to enlightenment. But what often happens is that the seeker doesn't take it all the way. And you end up with, in the case of the wisdom teachings, you end up with the crazy wisdom, which is when someone's got the insight, but they're still doing lots of or doing a good degree of self-centered things, because the self-centered desires are still present. So some ignorance still in action, still causing mischief and still causing suffering, even though the basic insight is there on the level of the mind. That's an incomplete teaching, or an incomplete, that's the spiritual journey has not been completed. That's how it appears anyway. Because on the other hand, there never really is any need for a spiritual journey. It seems that there is a need. As we said right at the beginning of this call, there is a spiritual journey, it appears, and it appears that we need teachers, and teachers can be very helpful, I said. Then I said at the same time that we don't really need teachers. There is no teacher really. That's just for the mind. But we're talking on that level of the mind, so the insight teachings, if they're incomplete, they just remain on the level of the mind. People understand intellectually, but there's no actual deep peace. Because the seeking actually still continues on some level. Similarly with the silence teachings, if they're not complete, if they're not allowed to complete themselves, then you just end up with somebody who's quieter and calmer, but within whom the sense, the identity of being a me, of being a body-mind is still intact. So you've got a limited belief still intact. So you've still got this belief in being a person, but they're calmer. Still suffering, but just less suffering. But if you take either of these two paths, the path of insight or the path of silence, interestingly, these are the two methods that Ramana Maharishi taught. The path of self-inquiry, which attacks the identity, the misidentity, the ignorance I, the body-mind, or the self-surrender, which is about relaxing and allowing God to flow, trusting God completely. Either one of these paths taken to the full end will take you home. But the wonderful thing is that you don't have to choose one path or the other. The two go together. And the two paths are not actually separate. For when we gain insight into who we are, even just a little bit of insight, then our mind starts to quieten down. Because we feel happier. We have a greater sense, maybe not completely, but we have a greater sense that we don't need all these things anymore. And many of you will have already experienced this or started to experience this. Things that you thought you needed once upon a time, now you don't feel you need them anymore. Because your illusions are falling away as your self-knowledge and your wisdom is increasing, relatively speaking. And then, on the other hand, if you quieten the mind, as you quieten the mind, then you're allowing insight to occur, because the natural intelligence in us is being allowed to see things clearly, and the insight naturally occurs through a quiet mind. So the quietened mind allows insight to occur, and insight leads to quietude, silence. And these two, instead of causing a vicious cycle of suffering and ignorance, they cause a virtuous cycle of wisdom and purification. It's the basic teaching of the Buddha, the basic teaching of Vedanta. You see these basic teachings everywhere, and these two aspects of the teaching, which go beautifully together to combat the two aspects of ignorance. The belief that we need something more to make us whole, and the belief that we are limited as a body-mind entity. These two aspects of ignorance. which are actually just one ignorance.